Today, the fight for the vote from African American men in particular. Both President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden and their running mates are pulling out all the stops to attract men of color who all too often have felt forgotten, neglected, or taken for granted by both the Republican and Democratic political parties. But not in 2020. Biden and Trump have enlisted the help of power brokers and a cast of celebrities to get out the vote. According to the Pew Research Center, 64% of eligible black women and 54% of eligible black men voted in 2016. Black women overwhelmingly favored Hillary Clinton, but she didn't do as well with black men. Her opponent, Donald Trump, got 14% and the big prize, the White House. Can Trump do the same or better against Joe Biden? We'll know in a few more days. Here to discuss Campaign 2020 are three prominent African-American leaders. Michigan-born and raised basketball legend and businessman Earvin Magic Johnson, Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist II, and Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, pastor of Detroit-based Great Faith Ministries and the founder of the International Impact Television Network. I'm Chuck Stokes. Come with us on our Spotlight on the News special, Inside Michigan's African-American Vote. Mr. Lieutenant Governor, the battle cry right now, 2 weeks before election, is take your souls to the poll. Have you been wearing out your souls trying to get folks to the poll?
Well, thank you for having me, Chuck, to talk about, the most important thing we can do for our democracy, which is vote. And Chuck, I've been spending time really all year, but certainly for the last several weeks, making sure that people have everything they need to vote. That included leading a march of 200 black men to the polls, to the Department of Elections in Detroit just 2 Saturdays ago. I also have been all over the state. I've been in Kalamazoo, I've been in Traverse City, I've been in Oakland County, Macomb County, Genesee County, Flint, Saginaw, marching people to the polls because this election, we have so many safe voting options, and I want to make sure that every Michigander exercises them. And it's particularly important in the black community and communities of color that we step up and vote like we've never voted before, because there's so much at stake in this election.
Is the way African Americans turn out and vote, is that make or break for the Biden-Harris ticket?
Well, it certainly will be decisive. And I think the fact that we're going to have record African American turnout, and specifically turnout amongst black men, that will deliver the state of Michigan for Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris. And I actually think the black male vote is going to be decisive nationally.
In past elections, all the talk from the pollsters and the pundits has been about the soccer mom. This time around, both parties are trying their best to be able to get African-American males on their side. As you say, African-American males, though, as opposed to African-American women, particularly for the Democratic Party, don't necessarily hold themselves to the party the same way African-American women have been the backbone.
I don't think that the Trump campaign's efforts are credible or honest. I think that his campaign's effort is more about him attempting to seem less racist than he actually is to white voters, because the truth is the Trump administration's agenda and record has been deplorable for black men and for people of color across this nation and our state. So instead, what we have been doing is investing in conversation with community. Look no further than the work that we've done as in the Garlin Gilchrist administration to be able to deliver for our community in terms of equitable investment in education, in terms of the clean slate criminal justice reform to automatically clear people's criminal records. We're doing a lot of work that will benefit black men directly, and that will align perfectly with the Biden-Harris agenda for racial equity. And so really offering something that is concrete and that is actionable for our people.
Recently, you were at a barbershop on the east side of Detroit with Magic Johnson, the basketball legend and very extraordinary businessman. What did you hear from the young African Americans, and particularly the men, about why it is they don't traditionally vote or may not feel it's important for them to vote this particular election, and how do you combat whatever you hear?
Well, Chuck, as a young man from the East Side, it's always good to get a barbershop on the East Side of Detroit, even with my good friend Magic Johnson. And so what I heard from the people who participated in that event is that they just wanted to understand and see themselves in the future, in a future administration. They didn't want to see an administration that only had a policy that would happen to them. They wanted to have an administration that would have them at the table to enact policy through them. Voting is step one to participation.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for coming out and choosing Rayfield's Barbershop for your political venue.
Yeah. But I think what we're trying to represent right here with this conversation in this community at this moment during this election is that this is where the power will come from. Not just to win this election, but to define the direction of the city, the community, and the nation.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, I don't want to make you feel good, but this probably will. I've been married longer than you've been alive. So translation of that is you're a young man. I point that out because 5 years ago, God knows 10 years ago, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be the second highest ranking public official in this state, and you happen to be African American and you happen to be a man? And what does that say to young black boys and teenagers, whether they're in the inner city or the outer suburbs?
Well, Chuck, it's one of my life goals to be married as long as you've been married. So I appreciate you.
My wife will be glad to hear that. So will your wife.
So, honest answer is no, Chuck. I didn't see this for myself. You know, I went to college to be a software engineer. That's what I thought my career was going to be in business. But, you know, because of the upbringing I had from my family that was always dedicated to community involvement, that's what led me to leave the private sector to get into community organizing after the Obama election in 2008. And I learned how to help people realize their political power and potential. But even doing that, I never saw myself as an elected official. It wasn't until the election in 2016 where I even decided to try to enter public life to run for Detroit City Clerk, be an election administrator. Little did I know that after losing that race, Gretchen Whitmer would ask me to be her partner. So I didn't see this coming, Chuck, but I do believe that God prepares you for things you didn't plan for. I think what it says is that people, all of us, we need to embrace the experiences that we have, recognize what makes us who we are, and that we can bring a lot of things to the table at any process if we're willing to participate.
Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said the other day, put out a ban on being able to have the right to carry around polling places. Why is that important from your perspective? Certainly it's going to be controversial.
Part of the reason it's important is because the president himself has been, you know, frankly, openly encouraging people to intimidate voters. And voter intimidation is illegal under federal law, regardless of what happened when Amy Coney Barrett was unwilling to answer that question in her Senate confirmation hearing. And so I'm glad that the Secretary of State has taken this step to say that the only reason that you will be openly brandishing a weapon at a polling place is to stop someone else from voting. That is unacceptable and un-American. And that it's not, there's no infringement on the right to bear arms to say that you shouldn't wave guns in front of voters, because that, again, is not part of the democratic process, never should be part of the democratic process. Just like it should be illegal to have guns in the Michigan State Capitol, where I preside, over the Michigan Senate, but it is still legal to do that, to carry semi-automatic weapons into the Senate gallery, like two of the men who were apprehended trying to kidnap the governor and overthrow the government. I saw them with automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons in my chamber. But that when you have a person like Donald Trump, who the only move that he has is to sow division, to inspire violence, and to create space for hatred, that we must react to that with participation, with voting, and with removing these people from office in the credible, peaceful way that Americans have been doing for 200 years. But these people are never going to stop me from making sure that people exercise their political power. That is why, even in the face of these threats, I continue to be in communities across the state of Michigan, encouraging and empowering voters to get to the polls and have their voices be heard.
Very quickly, when you hear the president tell his people at a rally, lock her up, talking about the sitting governor of a state, do those words matter?
Yes, the word, as Joe Biden says time and time again, the words of a president matter, because the words the president says leads to the deeds that his supporters take. Look no further than these plots to be able to do harm to the governor. These guys wanted to put her on trial. Lock her up is a precursor to doing just that. So this is all connected, and it's all disgusting. And the president, I don't know that he's capable of feeling shame, but should be ashamed of himself. And I believe that the voters of Michigan are going to lead the nation in voting him out of office.
People in Detroit know you as the pastor of Great Faith Ministries, but you also have another umbrella that you get to worry about as well, and that is the Impact Network. Bring us up to date on the Impact Network. What is it, and what kind of reach you have?
Well, the Impact Network is the largest African-American Christian faith network in the nation. It was birthed out in 2010, starting with a couple 100,000 homes. Now we are in over 90 million homes, and we are connected to cable and to satellite.
All right, that means that you control the narrative if you're the ownership in what you're trying to do. You have a special initiative that you've been working on, and that is encouraging people to get out and vote. Why have you put that together? And you've enlisted the help of another Detroiter, original Detroiter, and that's Ed Gordon.
Many have called this election crucial to saving democracy as we know it. Before we get into the question of voting for your health, we're now joined by Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, founder and CEO of the Impact Network. Bishop, welcome.
I feel that voting is sacred because so many people died, gave up their lives, were beaten, dogs attacked them for the right to vote. And it's important that we get people to the polls. That's our goal.
Is it even perhaps more impactful and more important in this particular election year, Bishop, because of the simple fact that we're dealing with COVID-19? And in the African American community, the traditional way of politicians being able to solicit the vote from the people was to be able to get into the churches every Sunday, stand up in the pulpit, make their case, and then hopefully have the pastor of that particular church be able to endorse them and still tell their flock, get out and vote for this particular person.
We feel it is a duty of ours to get this message out. And that's why we have this special with Ed Gordon that's going on all this month, going into Election Day, because we feel that the African American church is so important and so vital when it comes to choosing the next president or the Senate, the Congress of the United States.
2016, you were in the thick of it.
This man said that he wanted to start a race war. If elected president, how will you bring this country together race-wise? Even your visit here is very controversial.
Well, that was a terrible thing, and I think he was a sick, he was a very sick person to start off with. He was crazy.
Do you feel as though he's lived up to the things that he said?
When we interviewed him, he said that he was going to he was going to help the Black community.
Has he done so, Bishop? Because he certainly has been controversial, whether you're for or against him as the president. You've had up close and personal dealings with him. And we should say, for the record, and correct me if I'm wrong, even back then when all the controversy was going on, that you never endorsed him. Is that correct?
No.
That's right.
That's correct. I never endorsed him, and people thought that it was an endorsement. I just interviewed him, and I had been, should I say, invited to the White House, several times. But I'm not going to be a prop for anyone.
You did a prayer at the inauguration, correct?
Oh yeah, I did. I did the prayer at the inauguration. Yes, I did the benediction at the inauguration. Right. But the point I'm trying to make is that he was never endorsed by myself, and I feel like this. I want the president that's going to do the best for our community. Our community is underserved. Even when it comes to, when you look at just COVID-19, who's been hit the most? It's the African American community. Who's dying the most? The African American community. You ask, do I believe that enough been done? No, certainly enough not been done. And that's why it's important for us to get out and vote.
For the record, will you do any kind of endorsement in 2020?
No, you look at both parties and you can see that promises have been made. As Black ministers here in the city of Detroit, we have stood up and we have stood up on the side of these politicians, and we have encouraged our people to go out and vote. But we haven't seen the fruits of our labor when it comes to, looking back at the inner city and seeing what's going on in our community. Maybe some people have, in a good way, have benefit from it, but we have little or no benefit as far as I'm concerned. And when we look at how that we must make a change as African-American men, and knowing that we have an uphill fight, an uphill battle to make things right. And the only way we're going to do it is through voting, because we are a country of laws.
Young Black men cannot sit on the sideline this time. That's right. Or any other time, because this is important. If you want to bring about change, if you want things to happen, you have to vote. You have to bring about change with your voice and your vote.
Shortly after his talk with African American men outside the long-standing Rayfield's barbershop on Detroit's east side, I caught up with the basketball legend and very successful businessman, Irvin Magic Johnson, inside a hangar at Coleman A. Young International Airport. With a few fans and some members of the Detroit Tuskegee Airmen chapter looking on at the Lansing-born and raised superstar, we had our safe and socially distanced conversation. Magic Johnson, what is it that made you travel all the way from California to come back to your home state on the eve of this historic election to be able to help people get out and vote?
Well, I think it's important because Michigan always really decide who becomes the president of the United States. And so we want to make sure, I wanted to make sure I came home, stop in Detroit, then stop in Lansing to tell people they need to vote, tell people how important it is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can really change the way things are going right now in our country, unite people, bring people together instead of divide people. Also to jumpstart the economy, because it's really important that they have a solid plan to jumpstart that economy. So now we can create more jobs for people. It's too many millions of people who are out of work right now because we didn't react to COVID-19. We didn't react to the pandemic that's going on right now. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a strategy to deal with it. But Joe Biden has a plan. Kamala Harris has a plan, and them coming together, they're going to really represent all the people around not just the United States, but our allies will come back to us and support us once again and be side by side with us instead of going against us like they are now.
As we come down the home stretch, there seems to be a real fight, particularly for African American men. Your message to young African American men in particular?
Yeah, first, African American men, we got to vote. Last election, we laid out, we didn't vote. We got to get involved this time. We got to get involved in a big way. We can change policies. Things can happen that have affected our community in a negative way. You know, when we talk about police reform, we talk about all these things. We can't change things unless we vote, right? And also discrimination, racism, all the things we were protesting about, police brutality, those type of things. We can change a lot of those things by voting. So I'm urging all black men, not just here in Michigan, but across the country, to get out and vote, because that's how we bring about change, and that's how we bring about good and positive change in the inner cities of whether that's Detroit, whether that's Chicago, whether that's Los Angeles, and that's why I've been around the country trying to urge black men to vote.
We have really seen, particularly these last few years, sports icons stand up and make their voice heard. In many ways, they probably have been leading the pack. Yeah. Let me take you back a little bit. 1967, Cleveland, Ohio. You've seen the photo.
Yes.
Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Jim Brown, all standing together, protesting and saying, we want to be respected and we want our people to be respected. You look now and say, have we really come that far that African American athletes still have to be able to take that kind of stand?
Well, they have to, because, listen, it can happen to them. Just because they're successful, just because they're a professional athlete doesn't mean they still won't get discriminated against, right? And so racism still affects them, and it will affect their children, just like it will affect my children, just like it can affect me. So it's great to see that these athletes are taking a stand against racism, against police brutality, and speaking for those who really don't have a voice. So when you think about what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, on and on and on, these athletes saying, hey, no longer can this happen. And they're saying, get out and vote. Get out and vote to bring about change. And so it's beautiful to see them use their platform for change and to drive people to vote.
Along that line, were you surprised when Shaquille O'Neal came out and publicly said that this is the first time he's voting in 48 years. He was honest, and you got to respect him for his honesty,
Yeah.
but he was trying to make an example.
Yeah, you got to respect him. First of all, I didn't believe it in terms of when he said it, because, you know, I've been involved in politics for a long, long time. And so, but his honesty was good, because guess what? There's a lot of black men who were probably in the same position, right? Or just men in general who said, hey, I didn't vote. Or people in general said, I hadn't been involved in politics myself, I hadn't voted. So he was able to say to people now, I am voting, and you should do the same thing. That's how important this election is. When he can stand up and say, hey, I haven't voted, but I am this time. That's why it's important that everybody get out and vote.
And of course, while stumping for the Biden-Harris presidential candidacy, Magic couldn't resist my question about the NBA's newest world champions and two of his favorite loves. This is the start of the next Lakers dynasty?
Well, we hope so. You know, hats off to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They did a wonderful job, and the rest of the team. And we're hoping that this is the start of us winning a lot of NBA championships, but also just to return to being a great franchise again, a winning franchise. And so, you know, when I was playing, we had great battles with your Pistons here and the Bad Boys with Isaiah, and bent them twice. So maybe we'll see both Detroit and LA get back going again. That'd be great. That'd be great.
I'll buy a ticket for that.
There you go.
COVID or no COVID.
And what I'm really happy about, Big Ten football is coming back. Go green, go white.
Yes, he bleeds Lakers Nation and green and white. Next week on Inside Michigan's African American Vote, journalists of color will share their thoughts and insight into Campaign 2020. I'm Chuck Stokes. Thanks for joining us.